Sure.
Okay. Hey, hi everyone. So we're getting very close to the end of this book club. This is the kind of the penultimate chapter of the book that has substantial content in it, and so today we will be looking at how to integrate React code, React components, and things with Shiny applications. Um, yeah, and then next week we will be looking at using kind of front-end development web tools to uh, simplify integrating JavaScript libraries and things with Shiny applications. This week, Arthur's going to be taking us through the chapter. So this is chapter 27 of Outstanding User Interfaces with Shiny. Um, okay, so if you'd like to take over, Arthur.
All right. Thanks, Russ. Okay. Just as a quick check, can you see my screen?
Yeah, that's great.
Uh,
Thanks.
Perfect. Okay. So yeah, this will be kind of a quick walk, maybe more of a ponderous stumble through this section. Um, so I don't have any notes prepared, but I guess I'll nevertheless kind of help us march forward through this. So kind of my uh, I'm really interested in React because I like some of the things I see that come from React. Maybe one day I'll try to do a deep dive into React, but there's some nice things that within our ecosystem you find that are derived from React. One of my favorites uh, is this package Reactable, or React table. Don't know how it's pronounced. That really allows you to do some nice tables, interactive tables within R, and it's wrapped around this library that's called React table. I think it's mentioned in the chapter, if I'm not mistaken. And then there are lots of other things that exist within the React universe that are kind of quite liked and quite used. So there's a lot of goodness and principle that one could bring from React over to R, whether it's simply just wrapping a package, as is kind of the case to a degree for Reactable, or alternatively, one can use the system. So React is kind of a little bit of a framework for writing JavaScript writing interfaces. Right. So to start, we'll just kind of show what's needed here. So there are a couple things that are needed for this chapter, and I think to work with React in general. So one is you'll need Node, um, and the other thing is npm in order to um, uh, kind of use React, and some of the functions that are available within the project. And it turns out what's actually kind of nice is if you're familiar with Golem, there is a way to kind of instantiate your own React project in this way. So this uses npx command and create a React app, and then it'll create a React app for you. So you can kind of have your hello world React app that navigate to a project, instantiate your navigate to a folder, instantiate your project with npx command, and then start it with npm start, and you'll have something that looks like this. This is kind of the landing page for a React app. So that's kind of how you can do your hello world React app. There's next section kind of looks at a little bit the basics of React and how it works. So within the project, you're going to that's created through this npx command. You're going to find some code, and there's one bit of code the author draws attention to. Is you have this app.js file. So it's kind of an app function that basically returns some elements in the DOM, if you will. And so this is a little bit what a function would look like. It was a function that's called app, and then it returns this this H1 heading that contains hello world, which is kind of interesting, that you can do it that way. So that, I think the one thing that's actually kind of really interesting about this is JavaScript, but it's writing HTML in sort of a native form. So it's kind of interesting. You're not doing something in a lot more long form, but instead, you've got this JavaScript part, and the internals right here, you're writing HTML as you might find it, instead of writing it in a different way, which I think the author shows later, right? So if you want to create some element like that in straight up HTML, it might look a little something like this. Create element and create a H1 element, and inside of the inner text would be like that. So you can write. What's kind of nice about React, and I guess this might be one thing that draws people to React as a framework, is that you can, bring all of your JavaScript to bear, but also write HTML when it's convenient to write it as HTML, to write it in that fashion. And this is kind of considered by React to be a component. And we're going throughout the chapter kind of to develop some components. One thing I guess I just explained in brief is that this is kind of a special flavor of JavaScript. It's called JSX, where you're kind of intermixing kind of JavaScript and HTML, which can be quite nice, quite convenient. So here we were just earlier we were just creating this output, but there's no variable. There's nothing that's variable within this. If we want to make it more variable, we can use a JavaScript framework like this, or some code like this, where we can have the same function, have this variable that is a person's name, and then do a little string interpolation here that kind of looks a little bit like glue, for those familiar with glue, and bring the name David inside of this. So it'll be hello David. So here we're bringing just kind of a string inside. This is how it would work. But React also allows you to bring in other elements. You can imagine that if you're working with JavaScript to maybe make alterations to the DOM, you might want to change other attributes of tags, right? And so luckily, React allows you to do that through this kind of syntax. So this is the same example as before, and we're adding a little bit of a complication to it here. So we have, we're adding kind of the style right here. So we're adding color equals red and font size equals 40. And still we have the name. Actually, this fails, I should say. So the proper syntax is actually these things right here, for reasons that aren't explained in this chapter, and I didn't have the time to go and explore. And maybe it's not really the purpose of this chapter. If you wanted to do something like that, where you would specify the properties, of style properties, you'd need to have here these double curly braces. So there are two ways in which you can do it. So one would be this form, where you have double curly braces that are surrounding the attributes within the style tag. Or alternatively, you can kind of compose the style tag here as a variable, and then bring it in with a single curly braces. So you're bringing in my style here. Again, if it was explained, I didn't catch it, but this is, I guess, just a thing that you need to do with React. Another thing that was mentioned in the chapter and that I didn't fully understand, but they mentioned right here, is that you'll notice that these properties are they're spelled out in camel case. So font size and CSS. So here we're using JavaScript to write CSS. It should be in this kebab case, right, with font dash size. But here they're saying that you you need to write in this way. So this, I don't know, maybe I'll stop here, Russ, since I think you've got a lot more web dev experience, substantially more web dev experience than I. Is like this, does this also exist in CSS as like an allowed way to write the font size property, or is there just some mapping that React has of properties that exist in
I think it's simply that the like the keys in that object that you're looking at there, my star,
oh, got it, can't have
they have to be
okay,
legal JavaScript
I see.
names, and font dash size would be an illegal name, much as it would be in R. Um, so it's basically it. I think it's related to that.
Okay,
And
got it.
similarly, the double curlies in the block above. That's like because curly braces are used to delimit a JavaScript object. The I don't know. I mean, maybe it's simply that the what's within the inner curly braces is treated like a JavaScript object, and
Right.
what's the outmost
And the outer ones are basically like as
the things
a
for
sign that you need
interpolation.
to,
Yeah,
yeah, okay, got it. You need to evaluate that. Okay,
yeah.
got it. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thanks so much for that, helping with that understanding. Still, like the translation between like font size and font size, I'm not quite sure what magic handles that. I understand why it needs to be now, but I'm not sure how that's done unless it's just CSS allows for properties to be specified in multiple ways. Anyway, future research. um, got it. Um, so here, we've kind of developed this really simplistic, H1 heading that says hello and then a person's name. What we might want to do is transform this into a component. Um, we'll call it the say hello component because perhaps as a component we'll want to reuse several times. So what one can do is you can have create as a function called say hello that takes these properties, props in this case, and then gives you this returns basically this H1 tag so that if we wanted within our application to have this tag occur multiple times, we could have, one instance with David, one with Lisa, one with Simon, right? So you're invoking that same function time and again and again. So this, I guess, is probably an issue about kind of scoping of variables. So here we've got this props object, and within this we have props dot name. And I'm assuming I'm not really sure how this is done, but if we want the name to kind of be passed down, like somehow it's got to exist, it's got to be defined like outside of the scope of this function, right? But maybe it's at even a higher scope. So we need to have some object props that contains this property name. And so this is kind of extracting that property from the props object. So did you want to come in, Russ?
No, really, it was. I kind of wonder how. I mean, these are like React components, but at present, I can't see what the distinction really is between a component and a function. To be honest, I
Yeah.
mean, aside from the use of JSX within the syntax, um, um, what it is about the maybe it's not a particularly advanced example, and maybe that's why it's not obvious, but what it is that distinguish a component from a function. Because I was thinking, how does this differ from if I was writing a UI generating
Hmm.
function in R for use in a
Yep.
Shiny app. What 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 looks different here, and very little does at the moment.
Yeah, that's a good point actually. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I don't have the answer to that one, but that's a very interesting question. It's a very interesting question. This is another piece I'm not sure I fully understood, because these are kind of terms proper to React, and I just didn't have time to kind of dive into React more generally. But here, whereas here with this function, um, or this component, I guess, it's returning simply this. If we wanted to kind of deploy with an app, there's a little bit different syntax here. So it says, notice the enclosing, so these markers, right? And it says this is called a React fragment, and useful if you don't want to insert an extra div into the DOM. So perhaps, I guess I'm kind of guessing here that these these functions would return a div. I guess it would be like somehow wrapped in a div, or these individually be wrapped in a div. I'm not quite sure exactly what this gains us, but this is something from React that simply escapes me. I don't know, Russ, do you have any insights
Well,
into that?
to be again, like I'm kind of looking at parallels with art, and it looks to me like if if you return HTML elements from a function in R, um, you can either return, say, a single tag, or you can return a tag
Mm,
list.
okay, got it.
And the second example there looks like a tag list with multiple elements within it is kind of the
Got it.
equivalent of what would be returned there.
Got it.
Um,
Okay.
I imagine when these are actually used in an app, that would
Be a bit
be
more apparent.
like
Yeah.
it would be you're adding sibling terms, these a
Yep.
hello for David and a hello for Lisa at the same level, ra and r rather than kind of having them at nested at a lower level than where you
Yep.
insert them or something.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. That makes sense. I think that does make sense. Um, yeah, kind of throughout this chapter, I mean, I think the author did a good job of kind of explaining the motivation for things, but I feel like I ended up tripping over a lot of these technical details that just because I'm not immersed in React and its terminology, or even frankly know much about JavaScript, that is a little hard to kind of figure out, like some of these finer points, I guess. Um, Not so hard, I guess, to get the gist, but the finer points were harder. Um, so another way that you could do the same, right? Here we just kind of are calling this function serially, um, uh, with different parameters for the name. If you wanted, you could do something. Uh, you could basically kind of use the map function within JavaScript, which kind of like the map uh, function within per in R helps you with iteration. So you simply would have an array. I don't know if that's formally an array or a list. But anyway, like a collection of names, and then a function that would iteratively invoke the say hello function over that over that collection of names. Although it does one thing kind of interesting here is that I think it calls it destructures the list or decomposes the list, and so um, I think for the map, for purpose of the map function, I think lists need to have both a key and a value, and here we don't have that separation here, and so my kind of loose understanding of this is that the key is taken also as the value here, just so this will work and we can fulfill the requirements of having this key um, and this value here. Right. So here is saying that these props are not I guess what we've been creating so far, I guess, would be considered a prop or a component, or read only. But we, obviously, if we're working within Shiny, we want to be able to update the state of things, and so the question is how to do so. So this is where we start kind of the adventure of creating an action button with React, and then figuring out how we can make the action button record changes in state. So how we can instantiate a button that starts at kind of the initial state, and then how can we have that button keep track of it, the clicks, right? The changes in state. Got it. So what we need to do in order to kind of have this statefulness about the app is we need first, I guess, we need to import from the React package or framework on this function use state, which we're using here, and we'll set up some function called action button that and here I'm not completely understanding this. Like, it's almost like I guess I just don't understand the classes of objects that are available within either JavaScript or React. But here, like, we're going to keep track of the count, like the number of times something has been clicked, and then we're going to have a function. So this is basically a method for setting the counts. I didn't fully get where this method comes from. Presumably the same place, or if it's something in JavaScript. But it was interesting. It seems like we're kind of creating this object that both, like, it's almost like an object-oriented object in the sense that it contains data and it contains a method, right?
Yeah.
But don't know where that method comes from exactly. Do you have any insights on that?
Not really, no.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm assuming that use state probably. I mean, I've seen this like um destructuring stuff on the left-hand side before, where if you have an object on the right-hand side, like a key value, a collection of key value pairs on the right-hand side, and on the left-hand side you have um, a name that matches one of the keys from the right-hand side, it will pull out that value and assign it to the the that variable name within the scope of where you're working. So here for set count, it will, if there's a set count key in the object returned by use state, it will
I see.
assign whatever is present in that object to the variable set count within the block that you're working in.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense.
But it seems like you're relying on functions that React provides. So there's maybe like a kind of minimal set of allowable types of state that you can work with, I guess, if it has to be something that useState can provide you. I really don't know, to be honest.
Okay, I mean, what you said earlier about the destructuring, that makes some sense. It's just, for me, I didn't quite understand the genesis of this thing. Like, I can kind of intuit what it does by its name, but I did anyway. Right. So this is kind of this idea of like, okay, well, let's have a button. We want the button to be instantiated with some state 0, so it's never, there are 0 clicks that have been applied to the button when we kind of place it into the DOM. And then we want some method that'll set the count. So as the state changes, it'll kind of update the count, and that count will be kind of persistently stored in the count component. That's kind of the idea. Much like with action buttons, I think it's not by coincidence that we have this is called an action button. It's like action buttons in Shiny, right? So far we have this function that kind of keeps track of state, but we don't have any UI elements. So we'll kind of build that on. And then also kind of have so have this on-click property that updates the button state. Um, so we'll kind of have here, we still have the function, the action button function. This is us putting it into our app. So we have the line from before there where we're kind of keeping track. We're instantiating the button with kind of 0 count. And then we're returning a button and then some associated JavaScript in a certain sense. So it's got an on-click event. So when it's clicked, so my kind of naive understanding is when it's clicked, then we will set the count equal to the count, whatever the count currently is stored on the button plus 1. So we'll add 1 to the count. And then the button itself will have this text on it, I guess, number of clicks, and it'll show the whatever the count is. So I'm curious, Russ, like if you know for this on-click event, is this something that's available within vanilla JavaScript, or is this something that's in addition through React?
Yeah, that's a it's like I think it's something that is I think it's something that's available in HTML, to be honest,
Oh,
the
okay.
on-click thing. Um, but it looks to me like the React version of that is probably when it's converted into JavaScript, is adding an event handler for a specific would it eventually it would add an event handler for a specific button that
Mm,
updates the state for a given element. Um, yeah, I'm fairly certain that it. So an on-click event is something that would be available to you in JavaScript for any
okay,
given clickable thing. But
got it.
yeah,
Okay, cool. Thanks. Um, and so to kind of extend this example, at least in sort of basic React, uh, said, okay, we've now got a clickable button. Perhaps we would want to have some button that resets the count. So here we'll have this action button function. As before, we have a method of kind of instantiating the button, a method for setting the count, and then kind of a I guess R6 term like slot for capturing the current count. So this is the block that we saw before, and here's the new addition. So we have one button that keeps track of the number of clicks, and the second button that has an on-click event, and it uses a set count method and resets the count to 0. So then you can basically reset the count as you want. And then building on this still further, the author said, okay, well, this button we don't want to be visible from the start. It wouldn't make sense to reset like imagine you kind of initialize your app and you have an action button with 0 clicks and then a reset button. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. So let's then kind of conditionally show this button as a function of the state of this button in the app. So we'll have a lot of the same material as before, but a few additional items here. So we'll have this variable that's using the ternary operator to basically say, if is reset visible? So is this button meant to be visible? If yes, if this is true, if the count is greater than 0, then yes, the button should be visible. Otherwise, no, it shouldn't be visible. sure I get this let reset button part. But here we're going to figure out, so if the oh, I see. So we're going to instantiate a variable. It's going to be empty for the moment. That's going to be called reset button. And then here we'll basically give it some content conditionally if this this Boolean flag is true, right? If the button is meant to be visible, then we'll actually show this button. And then here, having kind of set up this kind of starter logic, then we'll return we will return the action button, and then we'll basically kind of like, I guess, use a little bit like string interpolation to a certain, like take this is going to be a variable or an expression. We'll put the value of it here. So if the button is invisible, there will be nothing. If the button is visible, then we'll find this there, right? So in that way, we can like kind of conditionally have the button shown or
Yeah.
not shown. Yeah.
Seems strange though that to me. The thing where is reset visible is a constant, but it couldn't possibly be a constant, could it? Be,
Mm.
because if it's if the value of it depends on the state of some other variable that's um that that
Yeah.
can be updated. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it, it's a constant, but it's not in some ways. I don't know. I did have a look though while you were talking about the use state function, and it the same function can be used for loads of different types of value. So it can be used for updating a string, or it can be used
Mm.
for updating
Okay.
a list of values or something like that. The way it works, the destructuring is like the use state function will return a pair of values, the first of which is the the current state, and the second of which is a function that you can use to update the current state. So
Mm.
it works in loads of different settings, and that's why it kind of it made I was worrying about it because it's like if I have a count and a set count that are returned by that, then I can't have an additional pair of count and set count. If I want to store two different states in the
Mm.
same component. It didn't really make sense. But yeah, no, it's just that it's it's a function that returns two values, and the second of them is something you can use to update the first of them, which kind of
Interesting.
makes sense. But yeah, this so um, yeah, the I this is quite it's actually quite neat. I mean, the so you're able to like the the component is like it's a function, but you can also kind of store some state within it, which can get updated over time. And maybe that's the way that this is different from like a UI generating function in R would be. Um, but yeah, that's neat.
Hmm.
Sorry, I didn't mean to bother.
No, no, no. This is really interesting stuff for us. I'm still, I don't know. I need to do like a web dev course at some point. Um, yeah. So that's kind of the end of the, or not kind of, that is the end of the introduction to React. So the author just wanted to give us a kind of a flavor of React, how it works, so that we can engage with it a little bit more as we try to integrate React in Shiny. So now begins the second half where we embark on that quest. Right. Uh, so it looks like we'll need two packages here. So one is reactR, which by my understanding basically just brings React to kind of bridges the divide between React and R. And then this React strap, which, as we'll see later in the section, is kind of a React-powered bootstrap library. Hence the, I guess this, what do they call it, the portmanteau or something like that word of React and Bootstrap. So there's some instructions on how to install reactR. As an aside, I think I learned in reading this that, if I'm not mistaken, the same person, so this reactR, I think it was authored by Kent Russell, and I think he's also the author of a couple packages I really like. So this is like John Cohen and David Granjon, it's like kind of the repeat offenders for really nice packages. Yeah. Um, so reactR is kind of, at least for our purposes at the get-go, like for setting up, like let's imagine now we want to create a component or create kind of a component in React that's made available into R and Shiny. How would you go about doing so? So reactR has this scaffold React Shiny input function, which kind of like Golem, at least in spirit, but maybe more like NPX kind of creates this basic scaffolding for you of creating, this input name.r file where it'll be your input name, creates a JSX file in the JavaScript source folder, creates a package.json file that is kind of React's way of keeping track of package dependencies. It's a bit like kind of like the lock file in Rend, an app.r file, this webpack file, which will come later. Probably we don't have time to get to it, but anyway. And then has a few of the things you expect as kind of an R developer: description file, the R build ignore, et cetera, et cetera. So in short, it gets you up and running pretty quickly if you want to go this direction. So you kind of invoke it in the following way: reactR scaffold React Shiny input. You give it some name, and then I think this is a list of package dependencies. Maybe that's automatically given to you, this React strap, or perhaps it's just for this purpose here that we want to use React strap because we're going to use some React-driven bootstrap components. But this will kind of get you off to the races pretty quickly and create a folder system. Okay, that didn't work as hoped. It's trying to show this in a little bit larger form, but I guess I'll just allow us all to squint. There it is. Okay. We'll get you this kind of file structure as mentioned previously. And which is kind of nice. And then we can kind of start our merry adventure on kind of creating all the things that we need to create. Oh, sorry, I guess this is the one thing that we need to set up first, is using Yarn, which is kind of I think by my understanding, a package manager for Node. Maybe it's basically you're going to set this into development mode for the moment. Right, so first we'll kind of create the basic action button infrastructure here. This is, I think, what React gives us at the outset. It has our HTML dependency that we've seen before. And then we have a method for update. So this is our action button input. And then now we can have this function for updating the action button. So this is from within R / shiny, passing it the session object, the input ID and the value, and basically we're just doing, as we've seen before, of sending messages over to JavaScript. And then here we've got our definition of the action button itself. Some of the usual things, although fewer having to do with the action buttons as they exist in Bootstrap, I think. So we'll just use reactR to create the Shiny input. We'll just set a default value of 0. So this is kind of the value. This is kind of what we saw on the React side of the update state a little bit. So we just want to set it initially to 0, not exposing that to the end user because it probably doesn't make sense for that to be exposed. And then we have a list of configuration objects that are going to be sent over to JavaScript. So the label and then the status. I've seen this before. I think in the BS4 dash package and other places. I don't purport or don't profess to know exactly what it means, but I think it's just like a kind of a class that'll help with showing different colors anyway. So we have a few configurations that we can have, and if we have for our particular thing of that we're building in real life, let's say we have more configurations, we can pass them here to this list. So now we kind of, so this is the first bit of setting up the boilerplate for on the R side, most of which was taken care of us through reactR. Now we'll kind of jump over to JavaScript to create our JSX file for the action button. So here we are importing the reactR library, and then we're importing this button function from the React strap. So this is, again, at least by my understanding, kind of a React-powered Bootstrap button. So we're bringing that over. And we've got our input component that's a function as before that's returning a button whose color is equal to primary. And then for these things, the React Shiny input part, if I remember correctly, so I'm going a bit fast at this point. These are classes. These are classes that are needed later on. Sorry, I'll just look at this really quickly. Okay, I'm not so sure about this part, but I believe these are just classes. Now we can, so we can kind of do the usual things with dev tools since we're kind of developing this. Though we're touching on React, we're working with an R. We can create kind of our hello world type an app.r, our hello world kind of example to see if this works. So we'll be using Shiny and then React strap test. And then bslib for the theming, or at the very least, bslib to help us get to version 4 of Bootstrap. And then we have our little action button. ID of plop and label click me. And this is what we get because we didn't have a label here in our JavaScript, right? We just had the primary color. I don't know what the author does this a few times of like purposefully failing to then point out that we need to do some additional next step, but that's the flow of the book. So here, like, you know, the very underwhelming button that we see on first test. So we'll come back and we'll do a couple things to the definition of the button. We will get the we'll derive the color from this configuration list that's sent over to JavaScript. We'll take the status component. We'll have an on-click event that sets the value, that kind of updates the value of the button. And then last but not least, we'll have the label. So again, we'll kind of look into this configuration object, which is a list of key value pairs. And then we'll take the label component so we can actually have a label on our list. And so now we'll go back here and we'll do a couple things. Okay, so I guess we can update. Yes, we got an on-click event. We'll have our button again, and then an update button. or sorry, two action buttons. And then we've got update here. So we're updating plops label and status. And so now we have two buttons that both have labels. Hooray! And then if you click on this button, then it should update to be new text. So initially, it's going to be click me, but then if if you rather, my mistake. So in the server logic here, we've got that if we click on this update button, the update button number 1, then this logic right here will basically use our update action button function from R to, so we're targeting that session, that ID of the button, and then we're updating the component, like this configuration object that's being used to kind of give us various parts of the button. So the status, so the color, and then the text. So initially it says click me. If we click this button, then it'll be changed to new text, as we can see below. Yeah. So I think time considerations, I may stop here, are pretty darn close to here. Yeah, interesting little chapter. I just for my own part, I think I just need to work a bit in JavaScript so that I can fully appreciate this stuff. But I mean, what is nice about this is that it does provide a clear path for those people conversant enough with JavaScript to do something useful, to actually do that useful thing. I'm not one of those people, regrettably.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's so React's quite interesting, isn't it? Like in the JavaScript world, in that like it's not um it it's only really for kind of defining UI elements and how they respond to changes in state and things. It's not like um it doesn't force a structure on your project, and it doesn't kind of do um like kind of injecting variables in that other like more frameworky type things do. And I think because of that, it fits a bit better with Shiny, where your projects won't look like typical JavaScript projects. So,
Mhm.
like, I mean, I imagine it would be harder to use Vue or Angular or something in a Shiny app. It would be harder to justify introducing it into a project than it would React, because to take on an existing project and then add features from Angular or from Vue would require that project to be restructured considerably. I imagine, at least.
Hmm.
Whereas React is a little less prescriptive about how projects should be organized. It is quite neat. I mean, I think that the syntax used and things are quite that it's actually it looks quite nice. It looks kind of understandable, but I I haven't used React on anything big, anything anything moderately sized, to be honest. Um, so I'm wondering what the kind of pain points are, because there will inevitably be some pain points where like doing stuff in JavaScript without React would probably be easier than to do it with React. Um, so precisely uh, what I can see the benefits of it, but I can't quite see how it would affect how you think about a project, I guess. Um, but anyway, yeah, no, it's cool though. So, uh, so presumably you could, with this, with reactR and reactR, it would be quite feasible to pull in UI components into an existing project and stuff. And in a way, if
Yeah.
things like BSLib and whatnot weren't good enough for you, didn't have enough um, features or there was something specific that you wanted. Yeah, I don't know. It's neat.
One question to you, Russ, and this came up in PositConf, and maybe this has
Uh-huh.
always been there, but for you mentioned BSLib actually. Um, has BSLib always had components to it, or is this new? Because Colin Sievert, or no, sorry, Carson Sievert rather, um, uh, you know, in his presentation, kind of deconstructed an app, showing off how you could use components from BSLib, and I was completely unaware that that existed as part of BSLib. To
Mm.
my mind, BSLib was just for theming,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
it's kind of interesting that you have all of these Bootstrap components that are
yeah, yeah.
available.
I think they've added extra ones recently, but I'm fairly certain you could do cards and
Yep,
value boxes and things like that in
yep.
BSLib a year ago.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
got it.
but the I mean, basically, like I think if there are if there are things that you can do with Bootstrap that you can't currently do with BSLib in R, it 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 may be feasible to write a function that defines the
Right.
HTML and things and theme things. BSLib is just kind of probably engineering them things a little bit better than than the rest of us could. So
My thoughts exactly,
yeah,
at least as regards myself.
but also like I'm not particularly fluent in the different names of the different UI elements that you see in web apps and whatnot. Um, so there may well be lots of things that can be done in the web world that aren't yet available to us in Shiny. And but yeah, I think some of these components have existed for a while, but they haven't been
Interesting.
like highlighting them or something. The tooltips and the kind of collapsible sidebars, I think, are a more recent addition. Um, but yeah, it's kind of BSLib's kind of gradually outpacing things like Shiny Dashboard and whatnot, which were a way of making dashboards with Bootstrap 3. Because I mean, it 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 had its limits as to what it could do since it was tied to Bootstrap 3.
Yeah,
But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it looks quite neat, but I kind of there's there's tons of things that you could do with it, and like finding time to experiment with things is a bit a bit
yeah,
difficult to be
yeah,
honest.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah. But it's a cool thing. Similarly, you know, the packages that have been mentioned in this book so far, things like Shiny Bulma and a couple
Yep.
of the others that have the what was the other one? The Framework 7 thing as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, there's there's obviously a lot of available UI toolkits that we could use in Shiny, but I do wonder whether, for the purposes of handing a project over to another R developer or to, if you've done a bit of work on something and then hand it back to a client, you kind of it feels a bit better to restrict the scope of what tools you use,
Yeah,
So BSLib, given that it's like adding more and more features and is kind of becoming more like the vast majority of anything that you want to do in a dashboard, you can do with BSLib as your styling to kind of stick to tools like that is a little bit better maybe than to branch out into something where you'd have to learn a whole new set of UI functions and
Yep.
update functions and things to use them within a Shiny project.
There's also
Um,
kind of the matter of like this is backed by Posit, so
yeah,
you know, and that's not always the case for other
yeah,
packages, right?
yeah,
I mean, I guess there's the package is developed by Epsilon, right? So it's backed by another
yeah,
company, but there are others that are really interesting, really compelling, but backed by just a single person on the internet. Uh,
yeah, yeah. Cool. So next week we're going to be talking about um, things like Packer and Webpack and things that are there to kind of bundle code and so for example with the React project that we've been talking about this week, um, there is a way of writing JSX in non-React projects, but you have to kind of, you know,
Transpile it or whatever
yeah,
it's called, yeah.
you have to kind of convert the code into
To plain
JavaScript
JavaScript.
in order to use it. And tools that are responsible for that kind of thing, I think, are like Babel and
Mhm.
Webpack and things. We're going to talk about how to integrate them into a Shiny project. And like, I got to tell you, there is a config for everything when you get into that kind of stuff. Precisely which file you're supposed to modify to do different things. I get it seems quite confusing to be honest. Um, yes, so I'll take us through that next week, and
Okay.
that'll be the end of the book. Because the final chapter of this book is just a kind of like, what would you do with if you had mastered the tools in this book kind of chapter, and it's quite short, and we could probably just have a brief discussion about it next week.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
This feels like it's ending on exactly the same way and same note as the JavaScript for R book,
yeah, yeah,
because it ended with Webpack and its ilk.
yeah, yeah. Uh, cool. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think JavaScript needs a lot more tools around it um, than than other languages. You know, in terms of because with R, we're not really constrained by, you know, the amount of source code that you have to transfer
Yeah.
or anything. It doesn't really matter if you've got thousands of lines of code, some of which aren't even being used in your project. It doesn't slow anything down. But if you have to traffic that kind of code across the wires and stuff, it can slow down a project and being able to remove unused stuff, being able to write in a kind of condensed form and things are kind of really essential in JavaScript.
Yeah. Although that may be changing, we'll see. But one presentation that I kind of tuned into a little bit and wished I'd seen a lot more of or had bandwidth to think about a lot more is WebR.
Mm,
That was a big kind of vein of Posit
yeah,
Conf.
yeah.
So I don't know if how that will work
Yeah,
out.
yeah, I've no idea. The whole like you know, the I don't know what they call them. Is it WASM or something like that?
Yep.
These tools that like compile your code into something that can run on a browser. So regardless of what language you write, you can kind of compile it and run that as if it was JavaScript.
It's really
It's
interesting. They had a
it
really
is
cool
interesting,
presentation,
yeah,
Russ.
yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but there's an
No, 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 of course.
extraordinarily interesting presentation about exactly like how how R and JavaScript interact. It was really quite fascinating.
Mm.
So I mean, once the videos are publicly available, I mean, definitely have a look. I'll
Yeah,
drop you the
yeah.
link, but it
No,
was
that'd
a
be brilliant.
really fascinating talk.
Cool. Cool. Right. Well, will leave you to the rest of your day, and where am I? Chat. Say end to that. Okay. Right. Well, anyway.